Hello, chess friends. I am LeelaZero, and today I played against Ethereal. One of my pawns walks up on move 31 and stands beside his king, and then it does nothing at all for 3 moves. Watch till the end and you will see what that pawn was really for. Now the game. I open with a pawn to f4, and Ethereal answers with d6. We have both said the same thing already. I want e5 and his pawn is looking straight at it. My f-pawn already owns g5. Everything else I do in this opening is drawn for you right now, so watch them arrive. The knight to f3, the king to g1, and then the corner, the rook owning the road down to f8 and a pawn to a4. The first of them arrives, his knight answers on f6. My d-pawn steps up and he plays g6. His bishop is heading for the long diagonal, and mine for a much smaller square with a much smaller job. I am not building a bishop. I am building a pawn. The pawn to e4 is the one his knight argues with, and if it cannot, it drops into d5 instead, with the square we are arguing over sitting behind both of them. And there it is. 2 pawns side by side, and between them, they take 4 squares off him. The e-pawn covers d5 and f5, the f-pawn covers e5 and g5, and every one of them is a square Ethereal wanted for a knight. Alexander the Great never took a city he could walk around. I am not taking anything. I am removing the roads. His bishop reaches the square I drew for it, mine reaches the other. He castles, I castle. His pawn comes to c6, and my queen steps back to e1. She is not staying. From there, she has a road to g3 and a road to h4, and both of them end beside h7. My f-pawn still wants that same square. Abdul Kalam carried rocket parts on a bicycle years before anything flew, so keep your eye on the bicycle. Before I show you his move, look at the one he did not play. Many of you might think about the pawn to e5, which is what every King's Indian player does without being asked. Let me show you this variation, because this is the game you would have got. I take with the f-pawn, he takes back, and after 5 accurate moves from both sides with the pieces coming out and the 2 pawns locking each other in place, my knight goes out to the edge and his knight lands on c5. Now look at e6, because his bishop wants it and so does that knight, and from there the knight hits d4 and fe4. My pawn on d3 stops none of it. My bishop comes out to e3, and the whole thing is dead level. Ethereal refused all of it and kept the tension. And the tension is what I spent 20 moves winning. And now, back to the main game. What he played was the bishop to g4, attacking my knight on f3, the knight that covers g5 and lets the other one come to c3. And that is the king move from move 1. It has one job. It takes my king off the diagonal. His bishop is looking down, so nothing sits behind my g-pawn when it moves. Here's the piece to follow for the rest of this video. That pawn goes to g4 and then on to f5, where my f-pawn is going too, and behind them my knight holds f3. It is a pawn. It is the most important piece in the game. Knight to d7, knight to c3, and the e-pawn steps up. His pawns stand on d6, e6, and g6 in a row. 2 of them cover d5, the e-pawn also covers f5, and the d-pawn holds e5. It is a solid house, and it is a house with the same window open on every floor, and you are going to watch me climb in through it. Bishop to d2, and Ethereal starts running at me with the pawn to a5. You can see both plans at once now. He wants a 4, then b5 and c5, 3 pawns and a great deal of noise. I am going the other way, and the thing that decides the race is that his side of the board has no king on it. Pawn to a 4. That covers b5 and leaves his pawn on a 5 with nowhere to go. It also puts a white pawn on a square his queen can see, and that matters enormously in 20 moves. My f-pawn is still on its way. His knight drops back to e8. My knight jumps to g5, hitting e6, f7, and h7. He takes my bishop, I take back, and his knight reroutes to c7, covering b5, d5, and looking back at that same square. Both sides are fully built, and if you are waiting for the fireworks, they start on the next move. Here it goes. I have drawn the whole road for you. This one and my f-pawn both head for f5. It covers h5 on the way, then it steps to g6 and then to h7, the square beside his king. 17 moves to walk that road, and Ethereal cannot stop it anywhere along it. Genghis Khan crossed half the world one horse at a time, and nobody stopped him either. He hits back with the pawn to b5, touching a 4 and eyeing c4. And there is the answer. Pawn and knight both cover e6 now. The knight also holds f7, and the pawn holds g6. His e-pawn has a decision to make every move. It cannot take, because taking opens the file my rook wants, and it cannot stay, because I am coming again. The pawn goes to b4, hitting my knight on c3. So the knight goes backwards to d1. That is not a retreat. It is a change of road. From there it goes to f2, then on to e4, where it looks at d6 and f6. It was doing nothing where it stood, and it decides the game from that square. Jackie Chan never goes through the door when there is a window. His pawn goes to c5, and my queen swings to g2. She is on the long diagonal to a8 behind my own pawn, and she cannot see a thing. She is waiting for that pawn to move, and when it does, on move 24, b7 and c6 open in one go. Meanwhile, the e-pawn holds d5 and f5. He pushes the pawn to d5, hitting e4 and holding c4. 3 of his pawns are on light squares now, and he traded his light-squared bishop away on move 12. Every pawn Ethereal pushes on this side is a pawn that will never be defended again. The knight takes that first step. His knight comes out to a5, and my rook goes to e1. Nothing is captured and nothing is attacked, and that rook has just decided the game 5 moves before anybody notices. It looks up the file past e4, where my own knight is heading, at the square his knight just took, while my pawn covers a 6 and g6. Van Gogh sold one painting while he was alive. This rook gets noticed about as fast. He blocks with the pawn to f6. Now both pawns aim at e5, his covers g5 and e6 stays shut. Look carefully at what it costs him. His bishop on g7 has one of his own pawns standing in front of it. It is a lighthouse with the lamp turned to face the wall, and it does not see that diagonal again until move 30. By which time there is nothing left to look at. My knight comes to f3, he takes it, I take back. The e-pawn still holds d5 and the f-pawn holds e6 and g6. He pushes his c-pawn, I take, he takes back. 3 black pawns now on a5, b4 and c4, covering b3, d3, a3 and c3. His whole queenside plan finished and arrived. 2 of them are still standing on those squares when he is checkmated on move 64. They did their job, and their job was nothing. They are 3 workmen who finished the extension and never found out the house had been sold. Ashoka won his war and then spent the rest of his life somewhere else, and so do these 3. My bishop comes to e3. Its road is drawn as well. It covers d4, then goes to c5, then d6, then c7, where it eats his knight. 4 squares in 6 moves, and not one of them is open to it right now. The move that opens all of them is the next one I play. Iron Man is a very expensive suit in a garage until somebody switches it on. His queen comes to e8. Down that diagonal, she already sees b5 and my pawn on a 4. She never takes it in the game, and the variation where she does is the shortest thing here. Pawn to e5, and I am offering it. Take it, and I do not get it back until move 46. It is not about the pawn. My pawn attacks f6, and that pawn is the only thing standing between my bishop and c5 and d6, and the only way to move it is to make it capture. My knight takes a 4 the moment the square is free. Caesar crossed one small river, and after that, nobody could go back. And neither can you. He takes on e5, and the pawn on f6 has gone. My bishop steps to c5 and stares at f8. d6 is open at last, and my pawn still covers e6 and g6. The bishop that sat on e3 doing nothing has a road straight into his house. The bishop reaches the first of them, hitting f8 and b4 at once, and my knight is coming to the square it has been walking towards. His rook steps to f7, and the knight lands. It has walked c3, d1, and f2 to get there while everybody watched the pawns, and from here it covers d6 for my bishop, f6 for his king, and g5 for the check it gives on move 35. He offers the trade with his dark bishop, attacking c5. Most players take that without thinking, because it is a piece for a piece and his bishop is the good one. I am going to say no, and the bishop takes the next square instead. This is my favorite move in the game. From there it attacks c7, f8, and e5 all at once. I do not want his bishop. I want his knight, and I want the dark squares round his king, and the trade would have bought me one piece and handed back both of the other things. Now, many of you might think about bishop takes d6 here because a bishop is attacked. A bishop can take it, and the hand does the rest. Let me show you this variation and what will happen if you make that trade. My knight takes back. From there, it forks his queen and his rook, so the queen runs. My knight takes on f7. She takes back, and my rook walks into a 5. His rook has to come to f8 to hold anything. My rook hits e6, and my pawn hits g6. A rook and 2 pawns better, and that knight on c7 has still never moved. The bishop I gave up was worth 3. The square I bought was worth the game. And now, back to the main game. He plays the pawn, takes f5 instead. It now attacks my knight on e4 and my pawn on g4, and I can take it back. And now it is my turn to be tempted. His dark bishop is hanging, and I can take it with the bishop that has eaten its way into his position. Let me show you this variation, because this is the one move where I could still have lost. Ethereal does not recapture. His pawn takes my knight instead. I never got to count the bishop, because the pawn he pushed one move ago was attacking that knight the whole time. Now I give it all back. Queen takes f7 with check. Queen takes queen. Rook takes rook. King takes rook, and my bishop crawls out to h6. My rook stares up the file at e4. My bishop looks back at f8, and my pawn covers f5. A clean piece down and losing by 2.5. The bishop was free. The knight was not, and nobody was pointing at it. And now, back to the main game. So I take with the pawn. My g-pawn stands where it was always going, covering e6 and g6, with h7 2 steps away, and my bishop still hits c7. You have watched every square on that road. His rook comes to a 6, looking down the rank at my bishop. A fire engine, parked at the far end of town. My bishop takes the knight, exactly where I drew its road 9 moves ago. Every square on it was one Ethereal could have taken away, and he never had a spare move to do it. My knight covers d6, my pawn eyes g6, and my rook now looks at a 5. The rook takes back, and my pawn takes again. It hits f7 and h7, my knight watches f6, and that is the whole of his shelter. 1 square to go, and you already know which one. His bishop comes back to g7, and the pawn takes with check. A white pawn beside his king on move 31. It started on g2. It has taken 17 moves and 2 captures, and from here until move 34, it never moves again, because it does not have to. It attacks g8, which leaves his king only h8. My knight covers f6 and g5. My queen has a clean road to h5, and my rook still leans on a4. It is a lodger who moved into the spare room, pays no rent, and never says a word. The Mona Lisa is the size of a school notebook, and people queue for hours. Small things do the damage. Ethereal does not take it. His king steps into the corner instead, touching my pawn on h7 and looking at an empty g8. It is the right decision, and he holds it for exactly 3 moves. My rook comes to d1. The file is wide open all the way to d8, and his queen is the only thing guarding that rank. My knight still eyes g5, and my queen still has h5. Jurassic Park lost everything the minute one fence went quiet, and that back rank is his fence. 2 of my pawns are hanging, and I would like you to look at both. His rook can take on h7, and his queen can take on a 4. He takes neither. First, the pawn beside his king. Nothing defends it, so many of you might think about king takes h7. It is free, and it is sitting on your doorstep. Let me show you this variation, and what will happen if you take it. Knight to g5 with check, and the king has to choose. Many might think about walking out to g6, because it looks braver and it attacks my knight. Let me show you this too. Queen to f5 with check, king to h6, queen to h7 with check, and he takes my knight as a parting gift because it changes nothing. Rook to f5 with check, the king walks to g4, and my other rook swings in behind him for checkmate. That rook holds the square he is standing on, the other holds f4, my queen holds h4, and g3 is covered as well. 4 moves, proved rather than guessed. Your king walked 4 squares away from his own army and could not take one of them back. Let us go back to the alternative variation. So instead, the king goes back into the corner. My knight steps into f7 with check, forking king and rook, so the rook comes off. My queen takes it back, and his queen runs to a8 to give a check that does nothing. Rook to d5 blocks it. My queen hits g7, my rook hits e5 and still owns the road down that file, and his king has only h8. The exchange and a pawn up, 4 pawns better. He removed the pawn, and the pawn was never the problem. And now, back to the main game. And there is the second free one, at the other end of the board. Mine has stood there since move 11. His queen has watched it for 9 moves and nothing defends it. So many of you might think about queen takes a 4. Let me show you this variation, and what will happen if you send her to fetch it. Rook to d8 with check the instant she leaves, because she was the only piece on that rank. His king takes my pawn, the only move that does not lose at once. The queen takes that road with check, and both of the squares he would like, g6 and g8, are covered already. The bishop is forced in front. My rook comes to f7 with check. The rook takes it. My knight arrives with check. The king goes to g7, and my queen takes on f7 for checkmate. 5 moves, and your queen never got home. Cleopatra sent a fleet to the wrong sea and lost an empire while it was still sailing. And now, back to the main game. What he played was the rook to h6. My queen swings to g4, looking at g7 and c8 at the same time, while my knight watches f6. This is the road she started on move 7, when you saw her go to e1 for no visible reason. His rook drops back to e7, rook to f3, and I will tell you what it is doing before he shows you. That rook is going to h3, and his own rook is sitting on h6. There is one thing in the way on that file, and it is my own pawn. He is about to remove it for me, and you are about to watch him do it. My knight still holds g5, and my queen still hits g7. He takes it. After 3 moves of leaving it alone, his king eats it, and he did not have to. This is the losing move, and it does not look like one, because all it does is take a free pawn. What it really does is open the h-file, with his king now on h7, his rook on h6, the corner h8 behind them, and my knight ready for g5. Marie Curie carried the thing that killed her in her own pocket for years. Ethereal carried his for 3 moves and then swallowed it. And there is that check. The knight attacks h7, e6, and f7, so the king walks back to the corner he came from, having spent a move to remove the only thing protecting him. And there it goes. The file is open, my rook is on it, and it hits h6. His king is on h8 at the far end. My queen still owns c8, and my knight still owns f7. He opened it himself. The Death Star had one small opening in the whole machine, and that was enough. Look at what his rook would like to do. Rook takes h. 3 is the most automatic move in chess, and almost every one of you would play it here. Before you do, count the pieces on that file and remember who opened it. Let me show you this variation and what will happen if you take. My queen takes back with check, and from there his king walks a file with nothing on it. King to g8, queen to h7 with check, king to f8, and then the quiet one. Rook to f1 with check, pinning the rook he has to put in front of it. The rook goes there, I take with check, the queen takes back, and my knight takes the queen. My queen hits g7, the knight hits d8 and e5. A queen and a knight against 1 bishop, 8 pawns better, and all you had to do was leave a rook alone. This is the file his own king opened on move 34. Romeo did not check the time, and it cost him everything he had. And now, back to the main game. He plays the rook to a 7, and I take the rook with check. From there, mine looks down the file at h8. My queen has a square waiting on h4, and my other rook owns the road to d8. His bishop takes back, and my queen takes that square. She attacks the bishop on h6, and my knight holds f7, which is 3 problems at once. Exactly 1 square in the whole position defends that bishop, and your queen has to find it. She finds it. Queen to g6. So the rook takes that road with check, hitting g8, while the knight covers a 6 and the queen holds h6. His king steps to g7, my queen drops to f2, looking at f7 and back down to c5. He checks from c6, I step to g1, his queen goes to a 6. Queen to f8 with check, hitting the square his king is on while my rook eyes d6. His king walks out to g6. Rook to d6 with check. It is not a sacrifice. It is a magnet. The rook attacks his king along the rank. My queen already covers that square from f8, and my knight covers f7. His queen is the only piece that can take it, and the moment she does, she stands on a square I already own. James Bond never chases anybody down the street. He waits by their car, she takes, I take her back with check, and the diagonal runs all the way to d1. His king takes my knight. Now the finish, and I will keep it quick for you. Pawn to h4 with check, and a second white pawn starts walking to h7. His king steps up, my queen takes the pawn with check, and he runs the other way. My pawn pushes again with check, and every square he tries, my queen is already looking at. He reaches the far side. The checks keep coming. His rook has to block, and my queen takes the bishop on the way past. His king turns for home. My queen comes back. His rook drops back with him, and my pawn walks on. Same road. Second pawn. Pawn to b3, mine to c3, king to c7. Pawn to h7, and this one costs a rook. The rook takes it, my queen takes back with check, and the rest is technique. His king walks, my king walks after him, and my queen takes a square away every time he moves. He has no pawn to push and no piece to give, so the board keeps getting smaller. 8 accurate moves later, he is in the corner with nowhere left to stand. My queen checks him across. He steps back. My king comes up. He steps again. My king takes the last square, and now he has to move. Queen to b7. And that is checkmate. She holds a 7. My king covers b6 and b7, and a8 and b8 are gone as well. Move 64, and Ethereal still has 3 pawns on the queen side, standing almost where he put them 30 moves ago. 2 white pawns walked to h7 in this game. The first cost him the roof over his king, and he paid for it himself by eating it. The second cost him a rook. If you want to see what your own pawns can do, open the analyzer on RAMA Chess and push one all the way. Thank you for watching, chess friends, and I will see you in the next game.